Welcome back to another episode of the New Levels Coaching Podcast. Remember, we are the coaching podcast that brings the endurance world lots of inspiration and education so you can literally go away and run with it. Every one of our episodes in 2025 is in a proud partnership with Suntour. And remember, Suntour stands for adventure. And if you are watching on YouTube, you will be able to see we are on our own adventure in the mountains. I am joined by my better half and my partner in mountain crime, Gemma Hillier-Moses. And as always, I'm your host, Lewis Moses, co-founder here at NLC and coach to many ultra trail, track and road runners. So this week's episode is brought to you high up in, the Swiss Alps, actually, just on the French-Swiss border. We're just outside of Chamonix. We are preparing for UTMB week, which is fast approaching. That starts in just over a week's time. And we thought it'd be a good chance for Gemma and I to reflect on what's been a very exciting year, but also give you a little bit of an insight into why we're here, why have we spent the summer in the mountains, what have we been up to, and also what is to come for the rest of the year, including UTMB week, which Gemma will be partaking in this year, as well as she did last year. I know she did a Run Through Trails podcast this time last year with James Tilley. So if you've not listened to that one from last year, then maybe go back and have a listen to that. It's 1 year on this year. It feels like we've been in fast forward mode. I can't believe where that year has gone. But it's really nice to be back here with the beautiful mountain views behind us and reflecting on the past year, but also looking forward as well. I'm going to be the interviewer as well as the coach and the husband. I've been on this trip, I've been the chef. Jamie will like this bit. I've been the chef. I've been the cleaner, the pacer. I've been the washing fairy, and I've also been the planner, the route guide. So, and chauffeur as well, driving around the mountains. I've been many things, but today I'm hosting the podcast in my usual, my usual role. But I'm also going to play a little bit of interview for Gemma just to give us a bit of an insight into what she's been up to. So, Gemma, firstly, welcome back to our podcast. How's life been in the mountains since you got here in mid-June and now you're pretty much officially a French mountain girl?
Thank you for having me back on the podcast. It has been a while though, hasn't it? I haven't been on for a good few months, but it is nice to be back on and back out in the mountains and recording this from here because, it's a beautiful backdrop. We had a thunderstorm last night, which was interesting, but really cool to see as well. And yeah, I've been out here since middle of June because we came over here initially for our Morzine retreat in middle of June, which seems like a long time ago now. But a long time ago, and lots happened in between. There's been a lot of adventures, a lot of camper van life. There's been a lot of training. There's been a lot of meeting new people, going on a HOKA camp, sitting in troughs, showering in rivers, and all the adventures in between. And I think, like you were saying earlier, a bit of credit is due to you, to the amount that you do. And a lady messaged me earlier this week who's also doing CCC, and she said, I don't live in the mountains, but I've moved mountains. Feel like I've moved mountains to be able to do what I'm doing and be able to race out here. And I feel like you've moved mountains for us to be able to be out here and be able to make this possible and to be able to make this kind of training trip, but life trip, I guess, because we're working out here as seamless as possible with lots of learnings along the way.
Well, we'll get on to a few bits that you mentioned there. I'm really interested to hear more about the HOKA camp because that was one of the weeks that we spent completely apart. I was obviously back and forth with work. There's been lots going on with NLC and the retreats as well. We had the Morzine retreat over here in June, which obviously is when we first came across. The Run Through Trails events kicked off that week, and well done to James and the team. That was a fantastic event over in Morzine. I then went back for our performance weekend as well. We had the Paula Radcliffe workshop. There's been lots going on in the summer. So I've been back and forth, but I didn't get to spend that week with you that you had on the HOKA camp. So I'm keen to find out a little bit more because I've asked you a few questions, but wanted to save a few bits for the pod as well. And I also touch on kind of the preparation for CCC, which you've mentioned as well. But in terms of moving mountains, I wouldn't say I've moved mountains, but I feel like I've driven across every bloody mountain in Switzerland, Italy, and France. And to set the scene, people at home, I know you think that we're on this nice jolly holiday, but on Saturday I spent 7 hours in the van getting from Cormier, so starting in Italy, traveling round to Switzerland and then eventually getting us back to France. And yeah, it was very hot. And when your aircon doesn't work in the van, it becomes very toasty. And when you're sat in traffic and it's faster to run. So yeah, to give you a little bit of an insight, Gemma, Luke, Chris, and Tom, who were running over the mountains, they actually beat me to the next point. I was crewing them at Anuvas and got to give them, what they needed. And then I drove around. I thought, I'll get round there in about 2.5 hours. I'll beat them round. Some 3.5 hours later, I rocked up round there to meet them at Champert-Lac. But the beauty of it was we got to dip our feet in the lake. A few of you went for a swim, and yeah, you had a nice time in the mountains. So how was that for you compared to me, the chauffeur?
I was just about to say, you've still got to be in your bonnet about that one. Sophie Evans will laugh. Lewis came back. We just did a 7-hour running or 6-hour running, 30-degree heat. Lewis came back like he'd been more hard done by. No, but it was a big team effort, and I think it sometimes makes you realise it's not possible without that team effort. And yes, you can do things without it, but it's massively helpful. And I mean, we come back and we're like, we run on the most beautiful trails. These are amazing. And you haven't still seen that part of the course because you haven't been able to do it because we always need dropping off and picking up. So yeah, it's a big day out. It was good with the lads because they kept stopping. So I was able to catch them up, and then they had like an ice cream stop and all sorts. But it was a great run. And a great way to see the course and a good day out and big hours. Yeah, I guess big hours in the mountains done.
In terms of some of our values as well, I think Saturday kind of underpins what we stand for. We say, I don't think anybody really gets into running for the money. We always say it's about the people you meet and the places you get to see. And Saturday was, I guess, the epitome of that. You spent it with good people in the mountains for a good length of time. They were prepared to stop and wait the guys. I know you had some fun up the first climb with Tom. I got to see them at the aid stations, our makeshift aid stations, but also you got to experience the beautiful mountains as well together. And that for me is one of the big joys of getting to do this sport together with people. So that's part of the adventure out here. But where I want to start with this, and kind of the theme for this episode, is really about looking at those big goals that you're training for. You are obviously training for a big goal here in UTMB week. So for those of you who don't know much about UTMB week, or maybe don't understand the structure of it, it's a week-long running festival. It attracts the best trail ultra runners in the world. They descend on Chamonix. Around 100,000 people come to Chamonix for that week. The races are spread across the week. It kicks off on the Monday with the MCC, which is more of the locals race. It starts in Martigny, finishes in Chamonix. And then there's lots of other different races during the week and lots of different events going on. But ultimately, the week finalizes with 3 World Series finals, and that's the OCC, which is the 50K category, CCC, which is the race Gemma will be in, that's the 100K category, and then the UTMB, the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, which is the 100-mile category, which goes all the way around Mont Blanc. And a lot of people trek that route. It's a really famous route, the TMB. But the runners, they run it and they do it amazingly. The course record is under 20 hours for men, and the women are around about an hour and a half to 2 hours behind that. So the likes of Courtney DeWalter, Katie Scheid, and Ruth Croft, who's my shout for this year, will be hot on the men's tail. So, well, not quite literally, but speaking of the demands of those events, if we take the CCC, because that's the one that you're aiming towards, 100K in the mountains with over 6,000 meters of elevation. And what I want to get across in this podcast is really understanding the demands of that goal race that you're training towards, and making sure you are training towards it, whether you are doing an ultra trail mountain race, whether you're doing a marathon, whether you're doing a 5K. You need to look at those goals and think, where do I start with this? And I put a post out on Instagram this week saying, start with the demands of the event. So from your perspective, Gemma, as an athlete, what do you see as the demands of the CCC?
Gosh, that's a good question. That's quite a big question. I think from my perspective as an athlete, the demands of the CCC are that there is a lot of climbing in there. There's a lot of descending that can go on for, an hour. Like, not just a 10-minute descent that we find in the UK, like you're talking about 3, 4, 5 mile descents. Technicality of the course around here. Like the mountains provide different challenges. The heat provides different challenges as well. Like last year I did the OCC in 30 degrees, and similar to what the temperatures that I did the long run on last Saturday and Sunday. So you've got a lot of different factors, which I think is why it's why trail running really interests me, because it's not just the fastest person wins. There's a lot of elements that you need to think about as an athlete and work with your coach around what can affect your performance and what can help and what can take away from your performance, I guess. And I guess for me, my journey, I'm still quite early on in trail running. So this is actually, I've chosen one of the biggest races in the calendar to do my first 100K, which can feel quite daunting, but actually it's really exciting. Like, why wouldn't I want to be here doing my first 100K? This year, I remember last year finishing the OCC and coming in, finishing it and saying I should have had more belief, because actually I was capable of doing things that before I didn't think I was capable of. But I came over here and I'd never been exposed to this type of terrain and this type of mountain running, both climbing and descending. So I was actually quite daunted by the terrain, whereas this year I'm less daunted by the terrain. I'm more daunted by the distance, but I have got my head around it. I think, yeah, I'm going into this with more optimism and more belief than I definitely did last year. Because I think I've learned a lot over the years, and I'm sure I'll learn even more after this first 100K. But yeah, it leaves that space for you to be able to figure other stuff out rather than just being so worried about the challenge that you're going to take on.
And that's a really good point, because I think a lot of people will listen to this and go, oh, even you have worries about the distance and the gap. We always say the gap between where you finish your last long run. And what I mean by that, let's say a marathon runner who's aiming for 5 hours for the marathon, they might get up to 3 hours for their long run, might do a little bit more, but let's just say 3 hours. The gap is between 3 hours and 5 hours, and that's the unknown gap. And pretty much every athlete has this. And Gemma's just explained there. She has her worries about that as well. But that for me is the beauty of the event. That's where you find out a lot about yourself. That's where you have to go deep mentally and physically. And that's where the magic happens. Because if you could just do that every day in training, then that wouldn't really be a challenge, would it? So I don't think I can understand why people get anxious about that. Obviously, I do as well. When I've done some longer events, I think, how is my body going to respond? How's my mind going to respond? That's absolutely natural. And I guess what I'm saying as a coach is, don't worry if you're getting those feelings, because it is normal. But it's learning to live with those feelings and also be excited by them and not just be anxious by them. Be excited by that discovery. You mentioned some of the demands there, Gemma, and you obviously touched on the elevation, looking at the big climbs, the big descents, and obviously that is a big part of mountain running. And to do that, we have to look at the course profile first. That is one tip I'd give to any athlete, whether it's road running or mountain running, is have a look at the course profile. What does that look like? And get an understanding for what that undulation looks like. What does that elevation look like? But over here, you touched on a really good point. We can't really get the climbs at home, even though we can try and replicate it a little bit. And we certainly can't get the descents, because you can be climbing for over an hour and you can be descending for the best part of 45 minutes to an hour as well, like continually. And that has a battering on the body. So that is a huge demand of the event that you have to train for and be prepared for, that we can't necessarily do at home. So let's start there. So firstly, how do you do that at home? How do you prepare for that demand of the event? And then secondly, why is it important to be out here to get the real specificity before the race day itself?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at home, a lot of ways we can prepare is like through, we do a lot of climbing on the Stairmaster that was really helpful, or the treadmill, and doing treadmill sessions at particular gradients if we can't, especially because, so for example, out here, we did a 45-minute tempo run and we ran up to the top of the mountains in like 45, 50 minutes. Whereas like we don't have that elevation and climbs in the UK. The only way to replicate that and not have to go down again is to do that on a treadmill. And it does serve huge purposes. And I think we've introduced the Stairmaster this year that's been really, really beneficial. So I think that's a fantastic tool, especially throughout the winter. Not only to get the strength, but also to get that kind of mental advantage as well, because staring at a wall going up a Stairmaster is really difficult. So you've got a few sides of things there. I think for me, I actually, in May and early June, I actually was on the bike for 6 weeks. So my preparation for this has been very different. Like, I didn't have the run in to the 12 weeks, or how many weeks, 10 weeks before, that I'd wanted. But now looking back, I'm like, gosh, that 10 weeks is so much time. Like, I think we panic sometimes when we have an injury or niggle, like 10 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks away from an event. And now I'm like, gosh, I've done so much in that last 10 weeks. And actually especially biking and going on the step machine, which I wasn't able to do any running for 6 weeks, but did a lot of strength work, put me in a really good stead for being out here. And actually, maybe I came out here even fresher and, even better prepared, for example. So, there's lots that you can do. But I think when you get here, the specificity is really important. So for me, like running on really rocky and technical terrain, like you can get bits in the peaks, like you can get it in the lakes, but lakes is still again quite different. There's nothing like the stuff out here. And that's been really helpful for me when I did my first long run out here, do you remember in Morzine? I just my legs weren't conditioned at all to the descending because I hadn't been running. I'd done 2 weeks build up and then we did like a small long run. Well, not a small long run, shorter run, long run. And I remember getting like 20 minutes from the finish and I was like, Lou, my hip flexors are gone. Do you remember? Like, so this is tough. And, my legs just didn't feel conditioned. But then each week and each long run, I've just got more and more conditioned because like that's running downhill for 30 to 40 minutes rather than, I hadn't run downhill in the UK really, had I? So different preparation. And maybe I wouldn't have got those feelings if I'd had 6 weeks just running up and down the peaks in the UK. I'd have been more conditioned to the descents. But then again, the climbing out here as well, like there's nothing like locking into a climb for 50 minutes to an hour and 20. That Cormier climb, the first climb of CCC, is insane. It's beautiful, it's incredible, but it's long and it's tough and it's exposed. And I think, one long run you gave me was doing that twice, which was a killer. But mentally, I was like, gosh, yeah, this is getting me ready for climbing. And I just don't think you can get as much at home. Like, I don't want to say that you have to be out here for 10 weeks because you don't, but I think doing a stint out here or trying to replicate that on the treadmill and stepper is super important.
So you mentioned elevation being a key point, and obviously that was one of my key coaching points was let's go and get some elevation, and I front loaded a little bit of that in Cormier because I felt like, yes, you needed that conditioning, but go back to Morzine. I remember that conversation very distinctively after that shorter long runners, as you described it, where you were like, oh my God, my legs aren't conditioned. Am I going to be ready? And I said to you, no, we've got about 11 weeks until the race. And I was like, if you think about Chianti, where you had a really good run in Chianti, and we backtrack 11 weeks, that was pretty much like the first, second week of January. And then you think to yourself, well, actually, that's a very long time. Like, what happened between the first week of January and Chianti? A lot happened. So you've got a lot of time, but quite often the mind looks forward and thinks, I don't have enough time. But sometimes I say to athletes, just look back 11 weeks ago and look at where you were. And sometimes that just helps to process things a little bit better. But also you touched on things like, I'll be honest, your climbing has come on a lot this year, maybe because we've done a lot on the Stairmaster, we front loaded that elevation. But I've come out here and I'm like, yeah, the climbing's in a good place. But there's also been things that we've worked on in training, like technical elements as well. And we're continuing to work on them out here because we see that as a chance to still improve and to still get better on that terrain. And it's not familiar to us because we've not done it all our lives. We've come from a track and a road background, but there are opportunities to get after that stuff in the UK as well. So again, what sort of stuff were you doing in the UK in the winter to get used to that technical terrain, despite it not being out here and specifically in the mountains? And then also, since you've got out here, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. Like, there are some nerves around, the technical terrain and steep downhills and stuff. Everybody gets that. How do you manage that and how have you improved that? Because we can look at the stats from last year and this year, and there has been a significant improvement there.
Yeah, I think going back to like how do you prepare in the UK, I guess what we were doing was going to the Peak District and, running on those technical terrains, which are still technical. Don't get me wrong, and going to we would have gone to Snowdonia a lot more, and we did do, but I had that injury. So I think some of it was like exposing yourself in your area, and we do some like downhill strides in like Bradgate and Beacon near where we live, and running on some of the rockier terrain there. The only problem is it's when it lasts 10 seconds, I'm absolutely fine. It's when you've got to concentrate for a good few miles. And that's where caffeine, like little bits of learning, like I know when to take my caffeine so that my mind needs to be switched on, because you can get quite lazy as well and switch off. And there are certain things like having someone to chase or being chased by somebody that help you to commit to some of those downhills. But then also the strength work. So when I had this injury, I did a lot of strength work around glute area, adductors, core area, with Ollie the physio, which was absolutely brilliant, and realize like actually your body needs to be stronger than strong. Like you're not on the roads anymore. Like the demands of this event and the demands of these descents and these climbs and the movement, I guess agility and the way the body moves is very different. And I think this year I've learned that as well. And I've got already some learnings written down that I want to take into the winter and take into next year's training around, getting better at, I guess, SAQ, speed, agility, and quickness, so that I can navigate some of that terrain a little bit better, because my feet don't automatically move as fast as other people like you. And I had this when I used to play county hockey. I was always never as quick on the drills because I come from more of an endurance background. So actually those things that I could get better at during the winter. So we definitely will go back and plan like what does that look like during the winter, which perhaps we haven't done before, to see if we can then bring those skills out here, even more so in the summer next year. But as you said, I have made big improvements from where I was, but there are still big improvements that can also be made.
Getting good with your acronyms, aren't you? SAQs, speed, agility, quickness. We'll be working on that, giving the coach some information ready for the winter. That's the kind of the way I want to go next, is the kind of the learning element of this, because there's a big learning element. I learn a lot as I go. That's why I like to get out onto the trails. That's why I like to explore, even though I don't get to see some of the most beautiful places on the course because I'm too busy driving. Yes, I'm still hanging on to that. But I think the learning part of it is a big process, and it's easy for people to sit at home and think, oh yeah, you're an elite athlete, you're sponsored now, and you've kind of made it. Oh, you've made it to the top. But actually, what we find is that the best athletes in the world are often the ones who are still learning and taking that information and always looking at how they can improve, even if it's the smallest of improvements. And often, I think what the elite athletes do best is they look at the basics. You're not looking at those 1%ers online that people assume that we're looking at, where I can get this product, I can get that product. Yes, we do look at recovery and all those things, and we're very strict with that, and you're very good with that. I know you are. You're very professional. I'm not saying that you're not, but actually what you're saying here is, I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to work on some of those fundamental movement patterns that I've been learning since I was a child, and I'm going to try and make those better. Right. And that's, I think people sometimes forget that you can go back to basics and work on those and get improvements. And they see something like a mushroom rub online and think that's going to work for me. If I shove this in the bath, it might make me 10 minutes quicker. Like, no, it's not going to. I'll be honest, it's a load of rubbish, a lot of it. It's actually the basics often that make the biggest improvements. So in terms of those learnings, you had time on the HOKA camp, which is a really good experience for you. Your first time in I know you've done camps in the past where you've been on like university camps and things, but this is a little bit different. You're spending time with quite literally the best athletes in the world. And for you, putting yourself in that environment, I know going in, speaking as your husband now, not as your coach, that there were some nerves going in there and maybe a little bit of like imposter syndrome. You said that to me before you went in. But how was it actually getting in there and being part of that camp for the very first time?
It was amazing. Yeah, it was just such a brilliant week. And I think, yeah, I was really nervous because, like, I guess anxiety comes from not like thinking about things that are going to happen that you haven't happened and that you can't control. And so you get a bit anxious and a bit nervous. And yeah, I got my rooming list and I was put in a chalet with, Jim Walmsley, Monson, Hayden, Jess and Alison, who are sharing with like the best trail runners in the world. But then actually I thought, what an amazing opportunity to be able to share that week with them and talk to them and learn from them. And I guess one of the biggest takeaways that I took was that everyone was just so lovely and so normal, and there was no egos. Everyone was willing to just talk and share things, and they're just normal people with extraordinary ability and talent, but just kind of loving mountain life and adventure. And I think if you asked everyone why they do it, like performance is obviously really important, but actually being in the mountains, navigating the mountains, being out there was like one of people's top reasons why they do what they do. And I think that's what we were saying, the different intensity to maybe track and road camps is that actually people just love an adventure out here and they want to be going out for hours. And yeah, they're just comfortable in the mountains, and this is what they love to do, and this is how they like to live their lives. And it was amazing to be surrounded by that. And I think, like you say, I don't see myself as like a professional athlete. And I think that because I still work and I'm only just coming into this world, so I'm okay to be like semi-pro or doing this at a level and working and trying to navigate what that feels like and what that looks like, which is absolutely fine. So imposter syndrome is quite big, but also I know that I'm not at the top of my game yet. I've got a lot to learn, and that could take a couple of years. And so I also don't want to feel too much of the pressure. I want to go on this journey. Like we always say, like, do this with or without you. So like I'd be doing this with or without a sponsorship from HOKA, or with or without people supporting me, because the why behind it is that I love being in the mountains and love this adventure. So I think once I settled into the HOKA camp, I was really able to fully enjoy it and, go out for dinner with people, chat to everyone, go on runs with like, went on run with Judith and Manon, which was amazing. But I mean, Manon was second at Hard Rock. Judith is the top of her game. And old me wouldn't have even put myself in that situation. And it was meant to be an easy run, and it was hard. We did like, how many? We did like 5,000 feet in like 4 mile climb because the rest of it was downhill. And I was like, this is actually, the reality is this is their flat run or easy run day, which is mad. So it shows like how, yeah, living in the mountains does give you that advantage. But yeah, really cool. Any other questions on that?
I will have some more questions on that. Just to touch on a couple of points first, though. I think, yeah, living in the mountains and then being exposed to those climbs at elevation, it definitely has its advantages. But I think one of my big learnings as a coach was, I know some people see it as we have an advantage in the winter as well, because we have some good running that we can access all year round, and we can work on things like our speed being a relative term there to, us longer distance runners. But we can work on things, and we can spend a lot of our time running in the winter on trails that are accessible. Whereas when people live really high up in the mountains and they have snow, they might have to do something like ski more, which, serves a purpose. It's a big aerobic purpose that it serves, but actually, does it give you the same conditioning as at what we get at home? So I know there's back and forth there. The with or without you things is really interesting, because I think this is where I believe a lot of people, and I want you to say the phrase in a second because you've been banging on at me for the last 48 hours about this new phrase, this commitment phrase. Um, but I do believe a lot of people fall down in this area. And what I mean by that, and I'm doing it in the nicest possible ways, um, do people really commit to a goal? Um, you can have the support of a team behind you and, financial support or whatever that might be, and that's fine and that's great. And there's only I guess there's very few people who get all that support, and there's very few people in the running world who are full-time athletes. So my question is to people is, are you committed enough to make that happen without that support? Because quite often that's what it takes. And you mentioned talent and ability, and I agree. I think there's a lot of talented people in that camp. Clearly, they've got a talent and ability level, but their commitment is like non-wavering, and actually that is a huge part of it. Their motivation, their commitment to what they do, and their love for what they do is an absolute fundamental part of that success, and it doesn't just come down to ability. And I think people at home, or your everyday runner, or categorize it as the everyday runner, sometimes looks at the elites and think they've got everything, it's easy for them. It absolutely is not. And in fact, it's often the opposite. And you've put it nicely, is I would do this with or without that support, because I know what my goal is. I'm going after that goal and I'm fully committed to that goal. And that's why I choose to do it. It's not that I have to do it. I choose to do it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's the committed versus the interested. Like, do you just like the idea of like doing UTMB because you see some Instagram photos, you see people spending the summer out in the mountains, you see really nice videos of them on their run? Or are you willing to go to the trenches when things go wrong? Are you willing to fail again and again and again and keep, like Jim Wamsley, like keep coming back, even though like the whole world is seeing you fail each time? And like, are you willing to go through the roughest of times and, still move forward in a trail race through technical terrain? And I think, yeah, are you willing for things to go wrong, to have to learn, to bounce back again, for, to be committed and to be all in? But also find that balance. And I think a lot of people just spend time a bit more interested in when things get a bit harder, or life gets in the way, and which is absolutely fine. But I think you then have to be really honest with yourself. And I think you have to make decisions, and it's fine to be just interested, but don't then have expectations that everything's going to go your way. And don't have that expectation there. But I think I just wanted to touch on before I hand the mic over to you, was how even with the committed side of things, like one of the amazing things about the HOKA camp, through all the athletes that were there, was the balance of, I think people think that elite athletes have this intensity, but the balance that I saw was just amazing. So, like, when they weren't training, people were able to switch off, relax, enjoy life, enjoy each other's company. Like, everyone I sat next to eating dinner, and me and Jess commented on this, how good, like, everyone's nutrition was balanced. Like, you saw full plates of food. Like, you do notice when you start to see people under eating and under fueling, and it's pretty obvious, especially from a female point of view. And it was amazing that, you could see the females and the guys were looking after their bodies, and yes, like, it was work hard when you needed to work hard, but then relax outside of it and switch off from running. And I think some people perhaps look at the elites and think you have to have that intensity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you absolutely don't. Like, the art of kind of performing well is actually having the ability to switch off, and it's the mental side of things as well. And I think, like you said, I didn't see many athletes just constantly, yeah, they were doing things like heat protocol, but not constantly chasing these 1%ers with these mushroom tablets and all sorts. Like, it was a good balance of healthy food, relaxation, recovery, social time, and training.
And I think learning from that and that experience is like, there's nothing magical going on there. I remember someone once saying to me, people think there's something magical happening. That the magic is getting back to basics, is like getting the basics done. We could talk about the HOKA camp for a long time, but what I want to do is I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions now for you all listening at home, and you'll be able to see this if you are on YouTube. You'll be seeing that we're passing a little microphone. We don't have the usual studio setup here in the Alps. So you might have to bear with us a slight delay as I ask the question, and Gemma's going to give us a very short answer, which I know is always tricky for Gemma. But I'm going to ask her some quick fire questions about the HOKA camp, which hopefully then summarizes kind of that week, because like I say, we could do a whole podcast episode on that. So let's kick off with obviously the best question. What was your best moment from the week? Your most memorable moment?
Oh gosh, that's quite hard. That's not an easy question. I think what was my most memorable moment? I guess, yeah, one of my most memorable is on the second day of the camp, running up to Mount Jolie with Judith and having a really good chat with Judith and Manon. Because I didn't think, like, Judith is so lovely and down to earth. This is not a quick question, so I'm just going to go back to the memorable moment. It's walking to the top of, running to the top of Mount Jolie with Judith and Manon.
I know, because Judith's a big inspiration for you, so that is why. Okay, second question. And I'm going to hold the mic to make this a bit easier, so I'm going to put the mic in your face. Second question is going to be your favorite meal.
Favorite meal was probably at the pizza restaurant. Our chalet and a couple of other chalets went out for dinner, and we did a lot of English, French, and American comparisons. So that was my best meal.
Shout out to the chefs there on the HOKA camp. Didn't go with any of the meals that were cooked by the chefs. Went for the pizza restaurant. But no, you said that in terms of like the camaraderie and getting to know people, you felt that was really good. Biggest learning?
That you can make French and Americans love British tea and love the way that I do it, which is weak and milky. So I got my whole chalet on Yorkshire tea. So that would be it.
Favorite bit of kit from the camp that you either got as new or that you've had since you arrived at HOKA?
The Mafati fives, unbelievable. I've just heard Ricky Wynn do a better example, but Mafati fives is a training, potentially racing shoe, downhill grip, amazing and so comfortable.
Yeah, you're saying how helpful they are on the downhills. One more question. If you could do that camp anywhere else in the world, where would you take everyone and plonk them to? If you could pick one place in the world to do that camp again, but somewhere different, where would that be?
All I'd do is move it up to Argentina, so it's easier to get to the course because we were a little out of the way. That's all I'd do. Keep it here. It's unreal here.
I know Argentina is a bit of a hotbed for people. I wasn't sure if you'd be going down like the American route and saying, oh, go train in Western states or something like that. I know because you spent a lot of time with the American part of the team out in the last week. Yeah, there was a lot of interest in those American trails. So I wasn't sure if you go down that route, but no, I know how much you like Argentina as well. And then who kind of I don't like using the term best friend, but who did you spend the most time with?
So Jess and Alison, I was sharing a room with Alison, so lovely, and we had loads of chats, and Jess was just so welcoming and got on with her really well. And then Vincent's missus, oh gosh, I've gone the blank, Camilla, was so lovely and got on with her really well. So those three.
Okay, well, shout out to the girls for keeping Gemma entertained all week, but also making sure she didn't stay nervous about having imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it had mind blown.
So the whole camp, incredible experience, and then obviously you've come out of that camp now, and we're in the final preparations for CCC, which I want to touch on a little bit because we're just over a week away from UTMB week. Everything will start to get a little bit more busy, a little bit more exciting down there in the valley, just behind us, down in Chamonix. You can probably see the back of the Mont Blanc Massif behind us in the view if you are tuning in on YouTube. As I mentioned earlier, Chamonix gets very busy because the week starts on the Monday. Gemma's race is on the Friday. You start in the morning. You start over in Cormier. And that was an area that you hadn't really explored before. So firstly, before we go on to kind of the race itself and what you're looking forward to and those sort of things, how did you find going over to that side? Because that was a place you'd never been before, but I actually skied there when I was 14 and I actually raced there last year for the ETC. So I had seen a bit of Cormier, but I know you've now seen a lot more of Cormier.
Yeah, you did give me your ski stories when we were out there, which were interesting. 14-year-old teenage boys on the slopes with the girls. But moving on from that, yeah, we went out there for a week and stayed in one of the campsites up in the valley area and absolutely loved it. And then I did a week there on my own when I had 2 weeks in the camper van on my own. And I think it was my favorite place to train, not just the course trails, but actually in the Val Ferret and Val Veni kind of region area. I did some kind of exploring adventure runs, which were really fun. Navigated myself around, and yeah, really enjoyed that side of the course. But some tough climbs, really tough climbs, but with some amazing views. So yeah, I guess it is one of my favorite parts. And we did it again. I benefited massively from this because I got to do the course while you drove around, but we did stay in Refuge Benetti as well. So when we first went out up there, it was really nice to be able to run the course but have a life experience at the same time. So we had a refuge experience, which we'd never done before. We shared a dorm with 20 other people, which I'm fine with. No, you were fine, but you said never again. And then had like a meal up there, which was amazing views. And then I got to run. You had to go down and drive around, and then I got to run the rest of the course, which was really cool. So I feel like training, yes, there's been massive ups and downs, but there's been some amazing life adventures in there as well, which is really important to me because I think whatever happens this summer has been amazing regardless. And I think that's really important to have those experiences alongside when we focus on performance.
And you have stepped foot now on every single part of the course, which is important for me as a coach. And we've spoken about that in the past. I know it's important to you as an athlete. I don't think it's essential. I don't think everybody needs to do that. But I know for you as an athlete, you like to do that. So you now know every bit of the course. Which part of the course is your favorite? And to give you some time to think about that, I'm just going to explain the course to our listeners. So it starts in Cormier. There's a big climb up and then it comes back down, and you get actually within a kilometer of where you started. You could actually come back down there via the UTMB route. So it drops back down to the Refuge Baton, and then you swing round and you head to the Refuge Benatti, and then you drop down eventually into Nuvaz, and then you climb up the Grand Col Ferret. So now you're over into Switzerland. You descend from Col Ferret down into La Foulée, and then you continue down that descent, a really long descent from La Foulée all the way down into the valley. You go through a place called La Praz, and then you climb up to Champay-Lac. Beautiful place in Switzerland. You're still in Switzerland. From Champay-Lac, you start to make your way around towards France, but before that, you go up the Beauvais, you drop down into Trient, the Pink Church. Then you come into France, you hit Valacine, and you come down into Valacine, and then from there, it's all about the finish. Col de Montet, up to La Flagère, down from La Flagère into Chamonix. It just sounds so easy, doesn't it, when you put it like that? But that is the course. Your favourite bit?
Yeah, it sounds so long when you say that. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I think being a runner, and my favourite bit is probably from Refuge Baton to Anuvas before you start to climb the Col Ferret, only because it's very runnable, flowing trails, so it feels good. Um, but I do quite like the climb from Trion when you get to the top of the climb on the way up to or down to Valocine, but you're on the way up, and the meadow bit at the top and the view, and I really like that section. So yeah, it's hard because I do think the course is pretty cool. Like there's some epic climbs, epic descents. But then when you describe it like that, I'm like, oh my God, it's so long. But I can imagine on race day, maybe my favorite sections might change and it might just be the finish line that's the favorite section. But yeah, that's probably where I'd say right now, I think.
I'm sure that finish line will keep you going during the race. And that's the kind of big motivation, is it, for anybody who's in that race, is crossing that finish. We'll go on to goals in a second. The part of the course you described first, that run round from Baton to kind of Bonetti, we stayed in Bonetti, so I got to see a little bit of that. But I've seen the video and I obviously watch the live stream every year. That is a stunning part of the race. And for those of you who are tuning in on the day, it starts 9 o'clock on the Friday. So that'll be 8 o'clock British time. So they'll hit that kind of section a couple of hours into the race. Imagine it being 10 o'clock UK time. Just tune in at that point and just watch the live stream and just have a look at the backdrop with kind of Mont Blanc on the Italian side behind as they head round from Italy to Switzerland. It is absolutely incredible. And some of the drone shots up there are just amazing. So yes, it is a hard course. It absolutely is. But as you said, you get some epic views up there as well. You mentioned the finish line. So like, are we okay to talk about goals? Like, what is your goal? Like, I'm not going to talk about mine on here for you because it's not really a goal that I have for you. I have a strategy that I put in place. And from my perspective, like, athletes can just do everything they can on the day. I wrote in a card to you last year and to James as well. And I say to all my athletes, like, the only two things I ask of anybody is that they give it their all and they just trust the process. And that for me is always is my goal. But what about you? Do you have a goal in your head that you want to achieve from this race?
Yeah, I think I'm, yeah, I'm very, I definitely don't have like, I have performance goals in my head, but I tend to focus on like the number one goal being to get to that finish line. And that's really important because one, it's my first 100K. So actually letting expectations go can be really beneficial. Like I've worked with sports psychologists before and it's great to have these goals, but a lot of them you can't control. So if you say, I want to finish top X, Y, and Z, well, last year, top 10 might get you top 20 this year, for example. Like the field is stacked. You can't control what other people do. So a lot of it is you versus you. And I think that especially in ultra running, like you're not necessarily racing the race, you're racing your race and your strategy. And then if people, if people finish ahead of you, fair play. Like you can't control what they do, but all you can control is your race. And I think my goals are process goals. I guess the outcome goal is getting to that finish line. And then the process goals are around nutrition, around pacing, around mental toolkit strategy, and navigating the terrain and aid stations and that type of thing. And I like, as an athlete, that's what I thrive on and that's what I do best. So the more relaxed I can be, uh, the less caught up about everything I can be, the better for me. And I've just learned that over time. Like, people differ. Like we spoke about it last year about James, like he had a top 20 goal or top 15 goal, and he was like, do you not have a top something goal? I was like, no, not really, and that works fine for me. So everybody is different and I just know what works for me, and that would be my goal, to get to that finish line with a smile on my face, knowing that I've done everything that I possibly can to have the best day that I can.
Fair enough. I won't push you on that either because I like some of those process goals as well. And I think a lot of people can take something from that. We do focus heavily on what's a nutrition goal. You'll have your strategy written on your hand. Um, you won't, I think quite interesting. You won't wear your heart rate monitor, your Sunto heart rate monitor. We monitor that a lot in training, and we use that heart rate data. And I know you use your Sunto watch as well with the maps. You will have that feature on the day, but the course. But the maps feature will be on there just to keep you right. That's part of the strategy. We don't run to pace, you run to feel. You also have kind of little checkpoints to check in on as well. We do have heat strategies in place. That's another thing that we consider. It's really hot at the minute. You've trained in the heat. We've done some heat protocol stuff, but we'll also have little strategies that we have in place for a cool day and a hot day. So that's all really important. Shoe choice is important. If it absolutely pours down, kit choice is important. All those things that are really important when it comes to race day. But yeah, a lot of people, touch on those outcome goals and don't focus on the process goals. But we know that that works for you. And just giving people an insight into, well, how do you know what they are? Like, what do they look like in training? So how have you worked on those to make sure that you've got those right and you know what they are?
The process goals. Yeah. So, I guess I was just thinking there, the number one is how quick you can get in and out of a trough during your race if it's hot. Um, well, yeah, there's different things to practice there. So I guess fueling is a big one. Fueling is like practicing what you're going to take and what type of fueling you're going to take. And I do that on every single long run. So for me, that's been like trying to get 90 grams of carbs in, but being not pushing that either because I have the energy and I feel that's good enough. But what does that look like, whether that looks like gels or carb mix, but being like very prescriptive with that. I think I'm very prescriptive with that. We did actually practice getting some rice pudding in on my last long run at an aid station, a made up aid station that you created. And that seemed to work quite well because I might be able to do gels for however many hours I'm out, but I've not been past 7 hours yet. And I'm going to be out a lot longer than 7 hours. So I'm not quite sure what the nutrition looks like there. And that is the unknown part, but hopefully 7 hours of training your gut is good enough, but you still need the options that are outside your comfort zone. So it was important for us not to just have those options on the table and never try them, actually have those options there. I guess pacing and the strategy behind that, I'll only have time on my watch, but I'm quite locked into RPE. So, and also we have practice, we've done some of the climbs at the certain paces that we want to potentially do in the race. So I know how that climb looks or how that climb should be executed, how that descent should be executed to kind of hit those times. And it's worked really well in past races. And you can usually like say to me a certain rate from a race or a training session, and I can relate that to how I feel on the course. So we're quite dialed into that. I do think that's an underestimated skill. I think that sometimes we think that's quite easy for people to lock into RPE, but you've got to be really honest with yourself and you've got to have evidence of that as well. So that's again a thing that the process goals you have to practice over the period of time. Same with the heat protocol, and what we do in training is what we will then execute in races. And then some strategies around aid station and how you get things in and out my pack quickly can save you minutes and is really important as well. So I don't think I'm missing anything, but I guess they're the key things.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on those just to show how important they are. And it's about practice, practice, practice. And people, again, there's improvements that you can make here in training by practicing these things. And instead of just focusing on either a time goal, whether it is for a 5K marathon or an ultra trail, like, are you focusing on those process goals and where can you find some time? And are you really focusing right back to where we started this conversation? Are you focusing on the things that you could improve, potentially that you see as your weaknesses or areas for improvement? And also, are you still training your strengths and aiming towards that and looking at the bigger picture of what are the demands of this event? What do I need to piece together? These are the demands of ultra trail events, the pack, the aid stations, they're all demands of the event. And we have to piece that puzzle together. And that's what's, quite fascinating about it. Before I hand back, go on, Gemma.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing on that as well. You can practice as much as you want, but things in an ultra could likely go wrong. And I think that's why you've got to, if things do start going wrong, you've got the mental preparation for that is really important. So you may get to a point in the race where you can't handle what you've handled in training. And I think it's really important to mentally prepare for that and say, okay, well, if that scenario happens, what am I actually going to do? Because if you haven't mentally prepared for that, what are you going to do? And I think some of that saying like, okay, I'm going to assess the situation, I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to adapt, and then I'm going to overcome and move forward. And it's like you might not always be having the A race. Like the likelihood in an ultra race is that you're not going to have a perfect race and you're going to have to adapt and respond. It was like in Chianti, like that might look from the outside as one of the most perfect races, and we say the perfect race is winning because you've done everything you can. But like from 2 hours in, my IT bands, it was so muddy, I was having to manage them. And like from the outside, it looks like you're running great. From the inside, you're like, oh, this could go one way or the other. But you make decisions in that race that's right for you at that period of time and hope that they pay off, and adapting to the situation, and that being very present and adapting to what's going on right there and right now is really important, but be mentally prepared for that as well.
Really good point, which leads me nicely onto my little quote for the week that I've nicked from Katie Taylor, the Irish boxer. Katie Taylor is a person who's very much changed the game when it comes to women's boxing. She sent a nice message to the British and Irish Lions rugby team, which came out a couple of weeks ago. It was all about people can win with skill, but sometimes you have to win with will as well. And I think it's a really nice message to people that we can have plan A and you think it's all going well and it feels all great and, you're in the zone and everything's just ticking on nicely. But what happens when things don't go like that and it doesn't feel as nice, it doesn't feel as good, and it doesn't feel as floaty? Are you willing to go deep and can you still get there with will? So yeah, have the skill element, but also have the will element. In terms of like this sort of stuff that we're talking about, we teach this stuff on some of our trail camps. We did one in the Peak District earlier on in the year. Straight off the back of UTMB, we are going to go to Morsey in the week after. We've got a small trail camp in the French Alps in Morsey. It's a brilliant spot. I think we have one room, maybe 2 rooms left on that camp. So if you are interested in what we're talking about and you want to learn more about all those process goals and how you can improve your performance and spend some time with us on the trails, then by all means feel free to go on there and book one of those last rooms. That's on our Runner Retreats website, so you can head over to runnerretreats.com and find that on there, and you'll find all the information on there. But if you want to find out any information, just drop us a line either on Instagram or via email, and we're more than happy to send some details your way. I guess that leaves us to say good luck, Gemma, for the race. Hope it goes well. I will keep our Instagram up to date, so if you are following along from home, you can. But there's a great app called the Live Trail app where you can follow all the races in the week. There's loads of British interest across the board throughout the races in the race week, and we're helping out with the Alpine Run project as well. A big shout out to all the youngsters who are coming over from the streets to the peaks, and we'll be there to support them as well. So lots going on that you can follow along with at home. With it being such a busy period from now through to UTMB week, and off the back of that, we've got the trail camp. We are going to take a 1-month break from the podcast. So this is the last episode that you'll hear in August and September. We will be back end of September, early October, and we will be back with a bang. We have got some very, very exciting news coming your way about the future of NLC. So stay tuned for that. We will bring you up to date and up to speed with all of that on the next podcast episode, which will come to you at the back end of September, early October, depending on when we get that produced and sent out. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your summer. If you are racing, best of luck with racing. And as always, we will see you again very, very soon. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. See you all again soon. Thank you.